This is the Tri Swim Coach podcast, where the most difficult leg of the triathlon becomes your friend, leaving your struggles and your competition behind you. TriSwimCoach.com, helping you to laugh at the water.
Welcome to Tri Swim Coach. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 140. And in just a minute, I have an interview coming up with the TriDoc Jeff Sankoff. And we're going to get into the 5 common myths in triathlon and how to thrive in the sport at any age. Definitely stay tuned for that. And we talk about some really important stuff, especially when it comes to longevity in triathlon, which he has definitely earned. So stay tuned in just a minute. And Happy New Year, by the way. Hope your New Year started off in a healthy way. And mine did not. I had a massive cold and just getting over it the last few days. So so hopefully yours is going a little bit better. Now, I wanted to ask you, have you signed up for the Tri Swim Coach newsletter yet? We put that out 2 to 3 days a week, and we give you tips, articles, videos, and anything to help you on your journey to becoming a better swimmer. So to do that, you can just go to TriSwimCoach.com. So without any further ado, here's my interview with the TriDoc. Have a great week of training, and we'll talk to you soon. Well, I'm really excited to have the TriDoc Jeff Sankoff today on the show. And he's an emergency physician and multiple Ironman finisher in Denver, Colorado. Since taking up the sport in 2001, Jeff has completed more than 50 70.3 distance races, including 5 world championships and 6 Ironman distance races, including 1 world championship. Now, Jeff wants to help you take your training to the next level. Whether you are a beginner or a seasoned veteran, Jeff can help you by sharing his experience gained through almost 20 years in the sport. And his website is TriDocCoaching.com. Jeff, welcome to Tri Swim Coach.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions for you. So I'm not sure where to start, but I'm really excited because a lot of our audience they're not like 20-something-year-olds competing for the podium. You know, they're more like 40, 50, 60 plus, and they want to do this for health. And so that's why I reached out to you, because I saw you on a forum, and I love the TriDoc coaching. I love that. So it's I think it's a great opportunity to, talk about aging and still performing, and you've done all this and you're coaching people with it. So it's just a perfect fit.
Yeah, as I've come up through the sport, I began only after I finished my residency and fellowship. And so I came to it later than a lot of people do. And I think that helped me in a couple of ways. Number one, it gave me perspective. Number two, it gave me obviously the income that's needed to be able to do this. But it also gave me the lasting power. I think people who come into it early tend to go hard. If they have success, they see that as they get older, that success might not come as easily and they might not stick with the sport. Others get themselves injured and then kind of pull out of it. Whereas for me, coming to it at a later age and having to learn how to swim in order to get started, I think I appreciated what the sport gave to me in terms of benefits for my health and well-being. And then only after I'd been in it for quite some time did I really decide to get serious about it in terms of my training. And then afterwards came the successes in racing. And now I do it for kind of a different reason. I do it because I have had those successes and I want to continue to build on that. But in doing that, I've seen how getting older doesn't necessarily mean that you A, get slower, or B, lose the ability to continue to push yourself. And that's been a real revelation for me.
Right. And we're going to talk about the 5 common myths in triathlon and how to thrive in the sport at any age. But I wanted to go back to kind of the beginning for you. So what ultimately led you to triathlon in 2001?
So when I first began, I was finishing up a critical care fellowship. And for people who don't know anything about medical training, it's a long haul. I did a 4-year undergraduate program. Medical school itself was 4 years. I did 5 years of emergency medicine residency and then an additional 2 years of critical care fellowship. So I found myself at the age of, 33 at that time, by the time I was finishing. And I was woefully out of shape. I grew up and did all my training in Montreal, Canada, which is where I'm from. And at that point, I really just played hockey. I had played hockey my whole life. And I was continuing to do so, but was playing with kids who were a lot younger than I was and realizing that I had gotten myself into a world of hurt in terms of fitness. I was woefully out of shape. very much overweight. By the time I finished my fellowship, I was 210 pounds. I'm only 5'8". And it wasn't a good look. And as I was finally nearing the end of my training, realizing that in a couple of months I was not going to be living that resident lifestyle anymore, I was going to have a lot more free time. And I have a family history of quite a bit of heart disease. And I kind of faced what I like to say was an Andy Dufresne moment, if you're familiar with Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. And took it upon myself to make a big change and really embrace fitness. And so I started getting in shape and lost, I'd say, about 20 pounds fairly quickly over the next few months as I changed my diet and really started to be more active. And one of my colleagues at work noticed, and she asked me in an offhanded way what I was doing. And I told her, and she said, oh, well, you might want to do triathlon. And I laughed and said, no, that race in Hawaii is not really something I'm interested in. And over the course of a dinner, we were at a dinner for work. And over the course of the dinner, she really sort of educated me as to what triathlon was and got me very excited about the whole thing. And I went home to my wife, who, to be fair, had not been at the dinner and didn't know about this whole conversation. And I walked in and I said, I'm thinking about doing a triathlon. And her response was to just laugh, because she knows I don't know how to swim at this point. And, her impression of triathlon also was just Hawaii. So she thought this was hilarious. And at that point, the gauntlet was thrown. And I said, well, that's it. I was thinking about it before, and now I'm going to do it. And so I hired a coach to learn how to swim. Spent the next year just really figuring out what triathlon was about, learning how to swim, and did my first triathlon as a sprint. Spent about 2 hours afterwards trying to decide whether or not I was going to sell everything I had purchased, and because it had been such a horrible experience, but then realized all the things I had done wrong and decided I would stick with it. And the rest is kind of history. And to bring the story full circle, when I first qualified for Kona, the first person I called was that woman who first introduced me to triathlon, and to whom the response I initially gave was, oh no, I'm never going to do that race in Hawaii.
That's awesome. So you actually learned to swim for triathlon. That was your first time swimming.
Yeah. Well, I think we all did some kind of swimming as a kid, but when I first started, I could not swim 25 meters.
Yeah.
And that is being absolutely truthful. I could not make it the length of the pool. I knew I could do breaststroke, I suppose. That was really the only stroke I could do. So I really had to learn how to swim.
So mentally, at that point, what was it like getting over that, for being able to just swim 25 meters to then building up and then eventually doing these longer races? How did you kind of mentally deal with that?
Swimming, and I tell people this all the time when they're getting into the sport, swimming is the toughest part if you're coming from a background that wasn't as a swimmer. And a lot of people kind of get nervous about triathlon because of the idea of the open water swim. But I think that discounts the fact that so many people just weren't swimmers to begin with, and
right.
Never mind the open water part of it. For me, it was just, going to the pool was such a chore, because it was so frustrating to see how, I just couldn't seem to get slower. I couldn't seem to build endurance. And that curve, with running, you can see improvements in running fairly quickly, but with swimming, it takes a lot longer. You really have to be patient. And I remember about 9 months into it, the first time I swam 1,500 meters without stopping, I was absolutely overjoyed and overcome with emotion. I just couldn't believe that I had come that far and was able to do it. It had taken me probably 40 minutes, but I didn't care. Just the fact that I was able to now swim the distance I needed to accomplish my goal, which was eventually to do an Olympic distance triathlon. And, from that point, after I did my first Olympic, somebody suggested, or I can't remember how the idea of a half Ironman came up, but I remember looking at the distances and seeing that, a half Ironman is 1,900 meters, and that's only 400 meters more swimming. And I figured, well, that's not that big of a deal at all. I had never run a half marathon. So I challenged myself to run a half marathon. And I said, well, if I can run a half marathon in under 1:45, then I'll sign up for a half Ironman. And I did. I ran 1:43 the first time and signed up for a half Ironman. And then I found myself saying, well, I'm never going to do an Ironman. I don't want to do twice that. And I think it's an experience that many triathletes are probably familiar with. It's the bug. It's just you keep wanting to push yourself to do that next thing. Although I will say, after completing an Ironman, I haven't felt any urge to do anything further than that. I feel quite satisfied with the Ironman distance. But Yeah, it was that stepwise progression and the mental hurdles to overcome in order to get yourself to become a swimmer is definitely the toughest because it's the most frustrating. It's the one where you have this image in your mind of what you're doing in the water and it's just so not anchored in reality because when you see video of yourself swimming, you're just a dog's breakfast. It's just terrible. And you're trying to figure out like, why is my arm not doing what I think it's doing? And
right.
Yeah, it just takes a really long time, but if you stick with it, and as I've learned especially in the last few years where I've really seen big decreases in my swim times, I used to say all the time, if you don't have good swim technique, you'll just never be able to swim. And I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I think you can make a lot of adaptations with poor swim technique, just learning how to be better with your poor swim technique. So, I'll never be the fastest swimmer in my age group by far. I've recognized that. But, one of the things I had to cope with was, I've said for a long time, you don't win on the swim, but you definitely lose on the swim. Right. And so I had to get myself to the point where I wasn't losing on the swim anymore. And that took a lot of work and it took a lot of time, but it was worth the effort to put in to get that done.
Yeah, you're totally speaking my language. A lot of people think they need to be perfect in every step with swimming, and it's completely not true. And I like what you said about kind of working with what you have. Instead of saying, okay, everything needs to be like, I need to have the perfect swim stroke. It's like, you're not going to have that. So why not be satisfied with kind of where you are and then just try to make the little improvements to that. And then it's just kind of a lifelong, trying to improve little by little, but not ever getting to this point of like, okay, now I'm Michael Phelps and now I can do everything.
Right. Yeah. Right. And you see the same thing with runners. I'm not going to run like those top marathoners, but you know what? I've chipped away at my times and I've gotten myself to the point where I can be a threat on the run. But it takes time. It takes patience. And with running, it's a little easier to fix things. But with swimming, there's no question. Like you said, it's marginal, tiny little incremental changes in your stroke, but then working really hard with whatever it is you're doing to at least get yourself as fast as you can possibly be and sustain that speed over as long as possible.
Right. Yeah. So there's a few things I want to ask you, but I think we'll kind of cover it in the theme of the show today. I really want to get into injuries because you've done 50 70.3s and I imagine you've had to deal with some injuries, and like, I'm really curious how you overcame those and how you've been able to have this longevity.
Yeah, I got to say, I have not had significant race-related injuries. I've been fortunate. Knock on wood, right? If I look back over the 20 years that I've been doing this, my biggest major thing that I had a torn labrum in my hip, but it wasn't really due to triathlon. It was more because I played hockey my whole life. Femoral acetabular impingement syndrome, which is the anatomic thing that can really contribute to tearing of the labrum, is much more prevalent in hockey players. And it develops as a result of the side-to-side motion that skating is contributing to the hips all the time. And so likely because of the fact that I played hockey as much as I did from the age of 6, I developed this anatomic issue that contributed to tearing my labrum. So that's been my biggest issue. I crashed my bike once and I fractured my scapula, but that can happen walking across the street. So I've been really lucky. Again, knock on wood, I haven't had any of the major wear and tear things. And I attribute a lot of that to the strength training program that I've built into my ongoing training. I do a lot of strength training. I believe very strongly that is super important, especially as you get older. Strengthening the muscles around your joints helps protect them and also allows for the continual, wear and tear. And then the other thing is just making sure that I'm not a huge adherent to the Phil Maffetone thing or to this whole 80-20 business. But I think something that they've gotten right is this notion that you shouldn't be out there hammering all the time. And especially as you get older, you can get tremendous fitness improvements and even speed improvements by putting in a lot of efforts at submaximal intensity, because I do a lot of running now, but I don't do it in like long runs. I do it in fairly short runs. So I'm running almost every day, but not for long durations. And I do so at fairly low intensity. And I've seen really surprising results in the absence of doing any dedicated speed work. My 5K, 10K, half marathon, and full marathon times have all come down very dramatically. And I have not sustained any of the typical running, injuries that one would expect to see. And just the last thing about injuries is I think triathlon is really conducive to injury avoidance because, the second you start having any kind of run-related issues, you can switch over to biking and swimming and allow for that run injury to get better before you shift back to it. People just have to listen to their bodies, be really, really careful about not overdoing things, and allow themselves the time to recover. And I think they can have similar types of success.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, so let's get into the 5 common myths in triathlon and how to thrive. You've come up with these. I don't know what they are yet. So yeah, go ahead in any order you want to go with.
Sure. And these are, I don't know how common they are. I mean, I think they're things that I've observed in spending time on Facebook and, reading through all of the triathlon related Facebook groups and pages, and also in doing my own podcast, the TriDoc podcast, where, I get a lot of questions from listeners related to triathlon and health. And, these are sort of the 5 recurring themes that I've come across. And the first of these is that recovery aids aid recovery and improve performance. And what I mean by that is there are so many manufacturers out there now that are marketing to the notion that recovery is the sort of, 5th discipline of triathlon, swim, bike, run, nutrition, and then recovery. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt, I've mentioned it already here today, that recovery is extremely important. But this idea that there's any magic bullet out there, there's patches, there's compression clothing and then pneumatic compression boots. There's all manner of different things that you can purchase and throw your money at to try and, quote, aid in your recovery, end quote. And these things are supposed to then, improve your performance. Well, in all of my reading around all of the science that's been done on these things, none of it's true. The fact of the matter is, the harder you push yourself, the more time you need to recover from those efforts. And all of these aids do the same thing. They make you feel better. There's no question. They give you some kind of psychological benefit, but they do not, and I want to emphasize that, capital NOT, they do not improve subsequent performances on next training days. They simply don't. So people need to know that when they're going in, if they are going to spend money on things, that just about all of these recovery aids, they do make you feel better, but they're not going to make you perform any better, and they're not going to decrease the likelihood of injury.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's good to know. What are some of the most popular ones?
These days, the most popular ones are the pneumatic compression garments. And I have a pair. I've got a pair of Normatecs. I love them. They do. After my legs are sore after a long run, I love sitting in them. They, 30 minutes of sitting there. And I'll tell you what, the most important thing about the pneumatic compression garments is that they make you sit there for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You take your feet, you're sitting instead of standing for 30 minutes. And I think probably more than anything, that's the most important thing they do, is they just make you do nothing for 30 minutes. And yeah, it's like getting a nice little leg massage. Who doesn't like that, right? But they're $1,100. And, I tell my athletes all the time, because I get asked this, the athletes that I coach, and should I buy them? And I'm like, look, they're a luxury item. Honestly, show up at a race. They're always there marketing them. Just go sit and lie in them. That's all the benefit you're going to get, really, is how they make you feel. So if you've got the money and you want to use them, and they, then by all means, but don't expect anything significant from them in terms of your performance.
Right. Now, what about the hot and cold therapies? Like, people are really into the, kind of like ice bath type stuff, and then also like saunas.
Yeah. Well, saunas, okay, so it's 2 different questions, really. Yeah. So I'll start with the cold, really, because cold therapy, actually just recently wrote an article on this for Training Peaks, and I did an episode on my podcast about this. Cold therapy has really been shown to be detrimental. We have to be really careful with cold therapy. Cold therapy can actually impair repeat performance. It's been shown to not be a good thing for cyclists to do, for example. It sort of intuitively makes sense, right? We've just done a lot of work. Our legs are going to feel so much better. And again, it comes down to this idea that when you use cold therapy, you feel better. You absolutely, psychologically, there is a definite benefit there. But in terms of physiologically and in terms of at the cellular level, cold therapy has been shown to be either neutral or in some cases negative. So it's not really advised. Sauna therapy is kind of different. The one place where sauna therapy has been shown to actually be really effective is in preparing to race in a hot environment. So if you're going to race in Florida and you live in, say, Ohio, if you're doing the race in April, for example, you're doing all your training in cold weather and you're going down to do a race in warm, hot weather, doing sauna training, and not necessarily training in a sauna, but actually spending 15 to 20 minutes in one of those steam saunas for every day for 2 to 3 weeks up to a race has actually been shown to help in heat adaptation and improve race performance. And it even has been shown to help in race adaptation, even in cooler environments. So sauna training is actually one of those things that has science behind it to help in race performance.
Yeah, I just did last night, the first time ever I did an infrared sauna. Do you know anything about those?
Yeah, I mean, the infrared saunas are operating on a different principle. So, so there's wet sauna, dry sauna, infrared sauna. So a wet sauna is going to have a higher perceived temperature because humid heat, it has to do with the physiology of just the transference, or not really the physiology, but more the physics, the transference of heat. So when you get into a hot sauna, the temperature of the air, the ambient air, is increased because it's saturated with very hot water. And furthermore, as you start to sweat, your ability to shed heat is diminished because you can't remove the heat from your body because the air around you is so saturated with hot water. When you get into a dry sauna, the air is very hot, but it's easier for your body to remove heat because your sweat will evaporate into the dry air and you'll actually remove some of the heat from your body. In an infrared sauna, the air itself is not heated at all. So the way your body heats up is kind of like in an oven, basically, or in not a microwave because that works on a different principle. But basically, the infrared generators within the sauna are sending infrared energy to warm your body. It will warm the air a little bit, but most of that energy passes through the air and just hits your body and causes your body to warm. Infrared saunas are much cheaper. They don't use as much electricity. They're a lot easier to have in your house. And, in terms of the science of saunas and everything else, infrared is probably not at the same level as a typical dry sauna. It just has to do with the fact that you're not going to, just like if you put something in the oven, it doesn't heat uniformly. Well, you're basically putting yourself in a kind of an oven. You're not going to heat completely uniformly. There are people who love infrared saunas, and I don't mean to disparage them in any way. They are terrific inventions. And I think the idea that they are able to bring home saunas down in price so dramatically is a great thing. But the nice thing about a traditional dry sauna is that you can convert them to wet sauna simply by dropping some water onto the heated rocks, things like that. If it was my choice in my home, I would take a dry sauna that I could then, convert to heat sauna just by having water evaporate in there. The steam saunas are really the ones that have been looked at in terms of adapting for races because increasing the ambient humidity is pretty important and getting used to that as you go to a humid environment to race. But either way, steam sauna, dry sauna, infrared sauna, whatever you're using to try and adapt to heat prior to a race, it's better than not using a sauna at all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the cold thing, this is interesting and we're going off on a little tangent, but the cold therapy stuff, one of the things that I came across, I was in Helsinki in Finland and I was with these guys that were doing a training session in the pool and they got out and there was these little tubs right next to the pool. And then they got into the tubs and I thought they were getting into hot tubs and they're like, oh no, this is like really cold water.
Yeah, that's a cultural thing. And in Finland, they love to do the sauna and then jump into the cold lake.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of science that is good and bad. It's good for young folks because it challenges the cardiovascular system, but it's bad for the same reason for older people who have cardiovascular issues because the stress that it puts on the heart is tremendous. Blood pressure, where they've done studies where they take people from those hot saunas where basically you're very vasodilated. So all of your, someone comes out of a hot sauna, they're cherry red because all their blood vessels are dilated. And then they jump into one of those cold pools and everything constricts and their blood pressure shoots up very dramatically. So they are supposed to, I mean, the Finns love them, the Swedes as well. They're supposed to be very health regenerative. And I have used them in the past when I've come across them and I find them quite brisk, but they're not necessarily being used in the traditional cold therapy way, which is, the way it evolved here was cyclists and then football and baseball players and all manner of professional athletes use them as because they believe it's reducing swelling and reducing delayed onset muscle soreness, which is not why the Finns are using it. And again, the science does not bear those assertions out.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's so trendy now. It's like, all the Wim Hof stuff and people are using it for all kinds of reasons.
Trends, unfortunately, don't necessarily mean they're backed up by evidence.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's go on to the second myth.
Sure. So the second one is something that I see often in social media, and that's I don't need a coach. And I say this, obviously, full disclosure, I am a coach, so there may be a bit of a self-interest here, but the fact of the matter is that people think they don't need a coach for various reasons. Some people think, well, I'm just getting into the sport. I don't need a coach. Some people think, well, I'm just a middle of the pack person. I don't need a coach. Why? That's really only for the elite guys. And then there's elite guys who think, well, I don't really need a coach because I know how to do this. My argument is that coaches are really there for, at least good coaches. Good coaches are there for a lot of different reasons and can help everybody, from beginners all the way through to professionals. In fact, there's not a single professional on the circuit who doesn't have a coach. And the reason for coaches is because they're there to help you establish a program that's right for you, to help you attain the goals that are specific to you. I mean, Lionel Sanders' goal is to win the world championship in Kona, but your goal might be just to finish an Ironman in under the time cutoffs. And both of those goals are to each individual just as important. And so a good coach, anyways, is going to tailor your program to get you to your goal. He or she is also going to be able to identify your strengths and weaknesses and then help you see them and then help you work on making sure that you're keeping your strength the strength, but also working on your weakness. Coaches are there to help you prepare mentally. Coaches are there to help you with nutrition, both before a race and then during a race. So many of the questions I see people asking all the time are things that could easily be answered by a good coach. And people who think they don't need a coach are usually people who haven't had one before. There are a lot of ways to get access to a coach. You can start with some of the canned programs that you can get online. That's an example of what coaches can do. But if you really want a coach who's there for you, there is really no substitute for a personal coach. And they come in all shapes and sizes. They are available locally. They're available online. But I really can't emphasize enough how valuable to me and to anybody I know who has had one, a coach really can be to all aspects of success in this sport.
Yeah. Would you say that it'd be good to start off, like if someone's like a beginner, would it be best to start off with, say, a group coach?
It really depends what they want. It depends on budget, obviously. I mean, not everybody's coming into the sport at the same level. It depends on time. There's a lot of things that go into that kind of decision. But I think that for the average person who is just trying to get used to this and obviously doesn't even know where to begin, absolutely. Group coach, great way to start. A lot of groups or clubs will have coaches that are available to the people who are members. And that's an excellent way to start and have some access to a coach. But what invariably happens is the more involved that an athlete gets into the sport, the more they realize that that is not enough and that they need their own coach. And that is the next logical step. But yeah, I mean, for the beginner to get a coach, probably not necessary, but there's going to be those beginners who have the means and the wherewithal that they decide that that's the right thing for them.
Right. And one thing I'll mention here about swim coaching is it's even a little bit tougher because you have these masters swim programs, which I have like kind of a love-hate relationship with, because most masters swim programs, it's a coached workout. So you're going to get a coach workout, and a lot of people go there expecting they're going to get some attention and be able to improve their stroke. But the problem is the vast majority of masters teams are focused on fitness swimmers to people that are actually competing in swimming. But there's not a lot of focus on open water or triathlon or even stroke technique. So you jump in there and it's like you get the motivation and maybe a little bit of coaching, but sometimes it's not nearly enough, or it's sort of like you're thrown in there with people that have all kinds of different goals. And it's just not, I always tell people, try to find someone, if you're especially early stage kind of beginner, try to find someone that can help you with your stroke technique rather than just like, hey, here's a great workout.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you say that, because swim people are always pushing triathletes to go to masters. They, oh, that's the way to get better, go to masters. And I'm like, yeah, I went to masters and it was a sufferfest that I got nothing out of except suffering. I agree with you. I mean, I think masters is great if you're a decent swimmer and you want to be pushed, because yes, you're always, there, especially if you're in triathlon for a competitive reason, you're always going to want to try and swim as fast as the person in the lane next to you. But when you can't, if you just physically can't, then it turns into a bit of a, why am I so slow kind of, thing. Yeah, masters is great for people who are good swimmers. But if you're, an average swimmer or less, you need more than that. And I agree with you. And even, most triathlon coaches today are really well suited to do video analysis and give pointers that way. That's what I do with my athletes. And I'm not the greatest swimmer, but I'm good enough that I can see what my athletes are doing wrong on video analysis and give them pointers to get better.
Yeah, video is awesome. Okay, so what's the third myth here in triathlon?
So the third thing, and again, this goes back to a lot of the things I see and I hear from listeners writing into the podcast, and that is that I can get faster by using product X rather than training more. There are so many things out there being marketed suggesting that, if you only use this, be it something you put in your body, something you put on your body, something you put on your bike, that this is going to give you such an advantage over everybody else. And the fact of the matter is that the people who go fast are the people who work the hardest. There's no question there's going to be some people out there who just have the background, have the genetics, and it's going to be tough to compete with them. But you know what? That doesn't mean that there are shortcuts. You've got to put the work in. You got to be ready to dedicate yourself. And if you are, then you're going to see the results and you're going to see the speed come that way. Can you make yourself faster with some of these things? A better position on the bike, aero wheels, helmet? Yes, absolutely. But those effects are magnified by putting in more training and making yourself a better athlete.
Yeah, it applies to swimming as well. With there's some tools that I recommend, and they will definitely make you go faster, especially when you're training, like the lava shorts and sometimes pull buoys and paddles and things like that. But people think that they're getting away with something when they're really not. It's just like you're going faster, but that's not helping you to improve, really.
Right. Yeah, I used the buoyant shorts for quite a while because I had poor position, and then I realized that it wasn't helping me fix my position. It was just a Band-Aid. And I had to get rid of the shorts and actually fix my position to make the improvements I really needed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think they can be useful early on when you're learning the drills and you don't want to be consumed with keeping your hips up all the time, because that's the normal thing is people sink and they can't really do it when they're sinking. Like nothing else is going to work, but you can put those shorts on, you don't sink, and you can actually get better at the drills. And then as you progress, you can start to go back to not using them.
Yeah. They're aids.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then what's the number 4?
So number 4 is something I confess to learning myself and believing as truth for a while. And that is I'm past my prime. I can only get slower. Since the age of 49, I've knocked time off of my half and full Ironman times every single year. And I'm now 53. So you can get quicker as you get older. I mean, obviously I don't expect that to continue forever. We know that with age, you will lose fast twitch muscle, you will lose slow twitch muscle, and you are going to see some decrements in your times. But you can make up for that to some degree. You modify your training, you modify how you race, and you can stay pretty fast. We've seen some incredible changes in the times over time. If you look at results across 70.3 and Ironman distances over the last decade, the 50 age group on up to the 65 age group have seen some pretty dramatic decreases in top 10 times. And I believe that is probably enhanced in some degree, but there's no question there's a lot of legitimacy to those times as well, as we have understood how to improve our training in aged athletes and how to make the most of the physiology as we get older.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because in swimming, the masters records just in the last 10 years have just been shattered. Like some of the older age groups, it's like, I mean, we're talking like minutes off of like 500,000, 1650 times. And it's amazing. And I think that is an encouragement that we don't have to necessarily take aging as like the sign that, okay, this is it, I'm done. And it can't possibly go any faster, right?
Yeah, and part of that is, as we have more leisure time, people are sticking with sports. And so we're seeing, a longevity in sports that we haven't seen before. But I think part of it also is just that we understand now that, getting older doesn't mean we have to give these things up and that we can continue to make ourselves faster. And there's no question. I mean, at some point, you are going to get slower. But the amount that you're going to drop off doesn't seem to be as much as we thought it was, and it doesn't seem to be as precipitous as we thought it was. And that, I think that's great news because it keeps people motivated and it keeps people encouraged to keep up with sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So now number 5, the common myth in triathlon.
Yeah, so this one I think is across the board. You'll see this across all kinds of sports, and that is that quantity of training is more important than quality of training. So often I hear people talking about the amount of hours that they put in and why am I not getting any faster when I'm putting in this many hours of training? And is this enough hours to be able to do an Ironman? And then when you actually look at what they're doing over those hours, it's very easy to see that somebody training easily 2/3 of the amount of volume that this person is putting in would be able to do significantly better. The keys to training for any sport, as far as I'm concerned, are consistency and quality of training. And most importantly, consistently training at high quality. If your workouts are all high quality and you do so on a day-to-day basis, you are able to see really great results, both in terms of your fitness and your performance over time very quickly. And people often forget this. And the most common time that I see people forget this is when they're ill. So I'm always asked a question, I've got a cold, I don't feel well. Is it okay for me to do the training workout today? And my answer is always the same. It's like, look, you could do the workout. You're not going to get worse from doing the workout, but are you really going to get any benefit from doing the workout? Or are you going to get more benefit from taking the day off, making yourself feel a little bit better so that you can come back stronger tomorrow and actually have a good quality workout? And people are so wrapped up in getting in their workouts and getting in the hours that they often forget that a low quality workout is probably not much better than no workout at all.
Yeah, this is funny because when I used to coach master swimming, almost everybody would always ask, how many yards is this? Or how many meters? How many yards was that workout? And it's like, there was very little consideration of technique or quality, like you said, but a lot of concern about, did I get my 3,000 in today? And I was always trying to de-emphasize that, but I wasn't very successful because no matter how much I would try to emphasize the quality, people would want not only the amount of the distance that they went, but it was also the time. Like I had this one group it was 1 hour. It was supposed to be 1 hour, but sometimes I would construct the workout to be done in about 45 minutes. And everybody would be disappointed. It's like, what are we doing, coach? Or shouldn't we do more? It's like, no, we're done. Yeah. This is it. We don't have to go an hour just because it's on the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. People are consumed with like volume, and sometimes half an hour is really better than an hour.
Yeah.
Just got to get used to that.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned earlier strength training. And I think if you're doing strength training, then a lot of these workouts don't need to be as long, right? It sort of makes up for some of what you're doing, as far as distance goes.
Yeah, I emphasize strength training most now. I make it a big part of off-season recovery. So after my athletes are finished their last race of the year, I really transition to a lot of strength training. And I have my athletes doing strength training 3 times a week, pretty much until maybe a couple of weeks before their first race. And then after that, I'll transition to lower frequency, usually a couple of times a week, and certainly much lower intensity workouts. But I keep it as part of the program all year round because I do believe very strongly that it is so important, not just in terms of performance, but also injury prevention. And yeah, it definitely contributes, even though it's funny because both Training Peaks and Strava and all of the other workout trackers out there, they kind of discount strength workouts when they tally your total hours. They kind of like diminish the importance of those. But I tend to believe the opposite. I tend to believe they're even more important, especially at this time of year when you're really focusing on building a base.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, cool. So we have our 5 myths in triathlon. And so I'll just go over them real quick and then we can wrap up. So 1, recovery aids. 2, don't need a coach. 3 would be training aids. 4 would be being past your prime. And then 5 would be quantity over quality. So do you want to add anything else before we wrap up?
Not really. I mean, there's a lot of health myths sort of, floating around out there. Like, I need to have a regular checkup or, I need to get blood work. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there that people have misconceptions about. And, that's why I have a podcast. That's what I address. And so I don't want to like take up all the time here. But yeah, I think those are the 5 common things or threads that I have sort of encountered over the last couple of years. And I hear them all the time. But no, I think that was a pretty good wide breadth of things that we covered here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been awesome and learning for me too, all these things. This is great. So if someone wants to get a hold of you, where would they go? Website, Facebook, Twitter, all that? Yeah,
I am all over the place now. So the easiest way to reach me is by email. I can be found at tri_doc@icloud.com. I have a website. You mentioned my coaching website earlier. That's www.tridoccoaching.com. I have Facebook where I've got pages for both TriDoc Coaching and the TriDoc Podcast. And the TriDoc Podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all of the usual platforms. And that comes out generally every couple of weeks and has been going on since, just over a year now.
Awesome. Cool. So,
and I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and TriDoc Coaching is usually the easiest way to find me.
Great. So we'll include all that in the show notes for this show so people can access that easily and get a hold of you and hire you as a coach if they're so inclined. So
thanks.
Yeah, Jeff, it's been awesome having you on. Thanks so much. And all the best with your coaching and your next race.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Tri Swim Coach podcast. If you like this show, consider giving us a 5-star review on iTunes and we'll read it off on the next show. And to get the latest triathlon swimming tips, tricks, blogs, and podcasts, go to triswimcoach.com. See you next time. Until then, befriend the water.